What's up, Taiwan? I'm Yvonne Young with news from here in Taiwan and around the world. The U.S. Trump administration has released a long-awaited list of tariff rates for countries across the world, including Taiwan. Most goods from the country will be tariffed at 20% starting next week, a higher rate than some other Asian countries. But President Lai Ching-te says that's only temporary and that Taiwan and the U.S. will soon announce a broader trade deal with lower tariffs. For more on this, we go to reporter Chris Gorin joining us live from our Taipei newsroom. Chris, how exactly will these tariffs work?
Well, for most Taiwanese exports, it's fairly simple, 20% across the board, at least for those exports being levied under a law known as IEEPA. Now, that law gives the U.S. president the authority to change economic policies towards foreign countries in a declared emergency. As a reminder, when the Trump administration came out with their so-called Liberation Day tariffs back in April, Taiwan was actually slated to receive a 32% tariff. So this 20% is a reduction of sorts. But at the same time, it's still higher than some of Taiwan's neighboring countries received, like Japan and South Korea, which are being taxed at 15%. China, on the other hand, remains one of the highest levied countries while it continues negotiations with the U.S. Now, this executive order came out after markets closed on Thursday in the U.S., but here in Asia, markets across the region were down today, including Taiwan's TAIEX, which closed just below about 0.5%. Now, President Lai Ching-te and several other Taiwanese officials held a press conference today about the tariff announcement, and here's a little bit of what they had to say.
我们最终的目标是既争取对登关税能够到合理，然后对台湾最有利，同时也争取232的关税对台湾的 ICT 产业还有电子零组件产业不至于造成冲击。
Now, Taiwan's cabinet yesterday said that they had reached a consensus with the U.S. on the technical details of a trade deal, but they did not release the details of that to the public.
And Chris, why didn't they provide more information?
Well, that's what a lot of people were wondering. At the time, they said that they were preparing to have a joint statement with the U.S. about the progress of the talks. But President Lai now says, as you saw in that clip, that it all has to do with these Section 232 deals. Now, most of Taiwan's most valuable exports, like semiconductors, smartphones, computers, until now have actually been exempt from tariffs. But those same products, including semiconductors, could receive special tariffs under this Section 232 law. Now, that is pending an investigation from the U.S. Commerce Department, and that investigation is expected to wrap up as soon as 2 weeks from now. And we don't know how high those tariffs might be. But Lai now says that the 20% tariff and the Section 232 tariffs both need to be made public before Taiwan can release the details of its trade deal with the U.S. Now, there's so much about this trade deal that we still don't know, but I did speak to one local economist today and asked him what he thinks are the key points for Taiwan as negotiations move forward.
The first one is we have to liberalize our market. As a result, some domestic-oriented industry in Taiwan will be affected. So this is we have to consider how to give them some relief program, the first one. Second one is our export to the U.S. because if we face a higher tariff, for example, still remain at 20%, higher than most of the Taiwanese competitors. Right? I think that will hinder our export capacity in the U.S. So that is another thing we have to watch.
Now, Trump's executive order does say that these tariffs can be reduced for countries that make a deal with the U.S. And if a deal is as close to being done as President Lai says it is, a change could be just around the corner.
Thanks, Chris. That was our reporter Chris Gorin live from our Taipei newsroom. Taiwan's economy soared almost 8% in the second quarter of 2025, the highest quarterly growth in 4 years. That figure is 2.7 percentage points higher than what was predicted in May. Meanwhile, exports shot up by 34% between April and June, reaching over $150 billion. Officials cited strong demand for AI and new technology applications, as well as orders placed ahead of the August 1st U.S. tariff deadline. The government says it will wait until August 15th to release its annual growth forecast after it considers the tariff impact. While dozens of countries face new U.S. tariffs in the coming days, Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum says her country has been granted a 90-day reprieve. U.S. President Donald Trump confirmed the tariff extension from Mexico in a social media post. It comes one day after he said no further extensions would be given and the August 1st deadline to strike a trade deal was firm. The two countries now have more time to negotiate a deal that avoids the 30% levies Trump previously threatened. Around 85% of Mexican exports to the U.S. will not be subject to any tariffs during the period. A new bill in the U.S. Congress takes aim at foreign governments that threaten or intimidate activists, journalists, and diaspora groups beyond their borders. The Transnational Repression Policy Act seeks to protect people from surveillance, physical intimidation, and coercion by authoritarian regimes. Senator Jeff Merkley, the former chair of the Congressional Executive Commission on China, pointed to Beijing as a frequent offender. He said the Chinese government often targets minority groups, including Uyghurs, Hong Kongers, Tibetans, and others. A new Hong Kong-focused media outlet has chosen Taipei as one of its home bases.
Our hope, just like our name, Pulse, is connecting the pulse of Hong Kongers in different parts of the world, in the UK and the US, Taiwan, everywhere.
Pulse HK is a collaboration between seasoned journalists from shuttered Hong Kong media like Apple Daily, now living outside of the territory. It will combine two platforms founded by Hong Kongers, the UK-based Chaser News and Taipei-based Photon Media. Hong Kong's government shut down major pro-democracy outlets under the national security law established in 2020. Pulse is still seeking funding and aims to launch in the coming months. A new report from Human Rights Watch says that new aid distribution sites in Gaza managed by Israel have resulted in the deaths of hundreds of aid seekers. As Israel's war in Gaza nears 2 years, over 60,000 people have died inside the enclave. That includes over 150 deaths from malnutrition, half of those children. International pressure on Israel to allow humanitarian aid into Gaza is growing. Israel is overseeing deliveries, saying it wants to make sure they don't get into the hands of Hamas. But hundreds of people have died in shootings near aid distribution sites, which has caused more international criticism. And to learn more about aid distribution in Gaza, our reporter Tiffany Wong spoke with Ahmed Benchemsi, spokesperson for Human Rights Watch.
What are your findings about the new aid distribution sites that have popped up in Gaza over the past few months?
Our main finding is that the system that the Israeli forces has put forward with the help of private contractors is not only flawed and militarized, but it also turned aid distribution into bloodbath. According to the UN, the Israeli military killed at least 766 Palestinians attempting to obtain aid. We have many testimonies of people who were there Palestinians who were trying to get aid, who said that I saw a tank blow up the head of the person next to me. We were walking on the road that the Israeli military told us to walk on to get to the aid distribution site, and they started shooting at us from
How do these controversial aid sites work, and where do they get their funding from?
The mechanism is it's an entity called the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, which is a very ironic name given what's happening on the ground. And it's operating on 4 distribution sites that were selected and constructed by the Israeli military. Well, the U.S. Congress should move on that. It should require notifications of any additional funding, because there has been already an announcement of $30 million in funding for the so-called Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, and the report on how U.S. funds are being used currently, including an assessment of effectiveness of the aid. That's the bare minimum that the U.S. Congress should do.
Recently, France, the UK, and Canada announced that if Israel does not agree to a ceasefire by September, they would recognize a Palestinian state. Does international pressure like this help the civilians in Gaza?
If that could be a way to pressure the Israeli government into doing very urgent measures consisting in opening, stop not firing at civilians anymore and letting aid flow in freely in a way that is respectful to their human dignity, I hope that leads to that. But it doesn't sound for me like the most urgent thing to do. We're talking about abiding by their obligations under the Genocide Conventions. And the Genocide Convention states that governments, all of them, all signatories, should use all forms of leverage, including targeted sanctions, arms embargoes, suspension of trade agreements, to stop Israelis' ongoing atrocities. Again, we're talking about huge proportion war crimes. We're talking about crimes against humanity, forced displacement, ethnic cleansing, acts of genocide. We're beyond shedding light on the situation. States have to move pursuant to their obligations under international law, and specifically the 1948 Genocide Convention that they signed, all of them.
That was Ahmed Bedchemsi from Human Rights Watch. Once silenced, now spoken with pride. Taiwanese Tai-gi, a variant of the Hokkien language, is making a comeback, and it is now getting unexpected assistance from thousands of kilometers away. Rick Glauer reports.
Praying for inspiration. 28-year-old writer Naomi Sim comes here to this 300-year-old temple in Taiwan's southern city of Tainan when she has writer's block, asking the local god to help her find the words she needs.
Naomi
does not write in the Mandarin Chinese. She and most people here grew up speaking and reading, but in Taiwanese Hokkien, also known as Tai-gi, a traditional language spoken here in Taiwan for hundreds of years, but once at risk of dying out.
I've heard that learning a language is like having another soul. I believe writing in my mother tongue can help me 100% inherit the culture.
Tai-gi is having a revival in Taiwan, particularly here in the country's south. Tainan is home to some of the most important cultural and historical sites in the country, many of them hundreds of years old. In the market and temples here, people speak Tai-gi freely, but this was not always the case. After the Chinese Civil War ended in 1949, the defeated nationalist government retreated to Taiwan and ruled it as a one-party state, enforcing the Chinese Mandarin spoken in China as the only national language and punishing those speaking Tai-gi in public. But since democratization, many Taiwanese have come to see Tai-gi as crucial to their national identity. An identity at risk from neighbouring China, which claims Taiwan as part of its sovereign territory and regularly threatens to annex. Young people here, many of whom grew up speaking Mandarin, are now helping to preserve and promote Tai-gi, with language events, publications and bookstores like this one.
在这个现代，学台语的意义是，可能有一寡是政治的意义，就是想要甲中国有一个分别，就表现讲台湾是一个多元的岛屿，多元语言的岛屿，佮有若是台语嘛，佮有客语啊，原住民族语啊。
Now, Tai-gi advocates here have also found solidarity in an unlikely source, a pair of British writers publishing a first-of-its-kind book connecting Tai-gi with Gaelic, the indigenous language of Scotland. They're bringing together 4 writers, 4 stories and 4 languages, Tai-gi, Mandarin, English and Gaelic. A project that sees Scotland's iconic landscapes described in Tai-gi and Taiwan's favourite goddesses speaking in Gaelic.
I think it's incredibly important that language diversity becomes something that is considered not a problem, but actually a resource for maybe thinking and feeling more broadly, something that is a positive contribution to a community.
Once spoken in hushed tones behind closed doors, Tai-gi is now echoing through classrooms, markets and bookstores, and printed in books that traverse continents. It's thanks to those who see language not as a line that divides, but as a thread that connects, that once silent voices are now being heard anew. John Su, Luffy Lee, Alec MacDonald and Rick Lowett for TaiwanPlus.
Thank you for watching What's Up Taiwan. I'm Yvonne Young. Take care, and I'll see you next time.